This is Join Us in France, episode 353. 353. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and Join Us in France is the podcast where we talk about France, great places to visit in France, French culture, history, gastronomy, and news related to travel during the pandemic. Today, I bring you a conversation with Scott Toporek, who went back to Paris at last. Scott has been to Paris several times. He knew exactly what he wanted to do and see, and we talk about his favorite spots in Paris, of course, but we also go into details about what it's like visiting Paris while this pandemic drags on. Some of you aren't ready to leave the safety of home yet, but some have made plans, and you'll see, Paris is not scary. If you like what we do here at Join Us in France, consider supporting us by visiting joinusinfrance.com/boutique to check out my cookbook, Join Us at the Table, my Paris tours on the Voice Map app, and my very popular itinerary review service, where I help you craft the best vacation in France specifically for you. Follow Addicted to France on Instagram to see Scott's photos of Paris. I'll post them this week. And of course, the best way to stay in touch with me and with the podcast is to sign up for the newsletter at joinusinfrance.com/newsletter. This week, I sent out a newsletter about the health pass in France. More about that after my conversation with Scott. Bonjour, Scott, and welcome to Join Us in France.
Bonjour, Annie, and thank you for having me here today.
Oh, it's lovely to talk to you again. We talked about your visit to the Dordogne and the Aveyron area before, and this time we want to talk about your visit to Paris, your return to Paris at last.
Yes, at last.
When were you there? What were the dates of your trip?
Okay, so we were there. This is actually a fairly quick trip for us, just from August 2nd through the 9th. You know, this was a trip that we had originally planned back in May of 2020, but for reasons we all know about, that trip obviously didn't work out.
Yeah.
And, you know, I wasn't sure, you know, when we would be able to come back to France again. I mean, there was all of these, you know, changes and, you know, with, you know, the pandemic, it was a little unclear when was going to be the right time to book a trip. So this was pretty last minute. I ended up booking this trip, I think, the beginning of July. And, you know, at that point, you know, France had reopened to U.S. travelers for a few weeks now.
Yep.
And it seemed like, you know, things were doing okay in terms of COVID numbers over there and here. And I thought to myself, I was like, well, I don't really know how the fall and winter will be. You know, I have this week off. Let's just jump on this opportunity and head to France.
Yeah. So did you also have like credits you needed to use up?
Yeah. So I had air vouchers from Air France from our prior trip. I think technically they were still good for another year. So I didn't necessarily have to use them right now, but it certainly was a temptation. I couldn't pass up. They were just laying there waiting to be used.
So how many times had you been to Paris before?
This had to have been at least, I think, our fifth or sixth trip.
Okay. So you're familiar with the area and what it's like to be in Paris. How was it different? Was it very different? Was it no different? What did you think?
Well, it was different, and I think it was maybe different for a few reasons. You know, we have been to Paris, you know, as I told you a few times, but this was the first time I had gone in August, and I knew going into this trip that, you know, the Parisians all leave in August for their vacation, so I was anticipating it to have a little bit of a different vibe because of that.
Sure.
But I also knew because of COVID, there was going to be a lot fewer tourists. So on one hand, I was I was surprised how many fewer people there were in Paris.
Yeah.
It compared to the previous times that we had been.
Yeah.
I think that in some ways it was nice because I saw Paris, devoid of the masses of tourists that we've seen in the past.
Right.
There were cafes that, I remember we would walk by on Ile Saint-Louis or in the Marais, and there would just be so many people there. You'd be lucky to walk up and get a table, or if you did, the waiters would be like, you have to order some food. You can't just sit here for a drink.
Mm-hmm.
Versus this time around, the cafes had plenty of seats. You can just stroll up, sit down for a drink. And, and on one hand, it seemed very casual. But on the other hand, I knew in the back of my head, like, this is very different for Paris in August, when there would normally be tourists everywhere.
Right. This year, we have hardly any Asians are coming to Paris. So there's a few Americans, much fewer than normal. Hardly any Canadians, no Australians, no New Zealanders, some Europeans, but it's very low and zero Asians. And so typically in August, there are a lot of Chinese and Japanese visitors. And so that alone would make a huge difference.
I think so. And, I remember going to Paris in the summer and you would see the big groups of tours, where you would have a tour guide and, 20, 30 people following them around. There was, of course, none of that.
Yeah.
The only tourists I did see were fellow Americans. I think there was actually maybe some European. I know I saw a few Swedish tourists, I could say for sure. But yeah, it was a different mix of people that are visiting there.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Yeah, the hotels are about, I think they're saying 60% occupancy. For the month of August, so it's really quite low for Paris. Paris is usually, super full. But you did get to see some things that you hadn't seen before. So, I see in your photos that you went to La Samaritaine, you went to the Carnavalet Museum. So tell me about La Samaritaine. What was it like? I haven't been inside yet.
Well, first of all, I have to tell you that it being 2 years since I've been to Paris, I had probably a list half a mile long of things that I wanted to see. So I definitely had to go into this trip and pare things down and say, okay, well, I want to enjoy our time there. I don't want to be rushed. I want to do things that we haven't seen before and that are new. So so La Samaritaine was definitely one of the top things on the list. I had read about the articles, of all the renovations that's been going on for such a long time.
Yeah.
I will say my impression was that it is a gorgeous building from the outside and the inside. We went in there to check things out, and I think there's more to come in that complex. In other words, there's the main sort of building there that they renovated, the one that's very traditional Art Deco.
Yep.
And you go in there, and it has multiple levels, and you can go up the stairs or the escalators, and they have, all of these, beautiful things for on sale, but they're all ridiculously expensive.
Sure.
And I feel that partly because it was new, there were a lot of people going in there just to look at the building.
Yeah.
And to go up at the top. And not a lot of people were really there to shop.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a weird vibe. It's weird to go into a store where people aren't really going to shop. They're going in to look at the building.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that being said, it's a beautiful building.
Yeah.
And I think that we can tell there was a lot of stuff under construction around it. So there's going to be, I think, more to come in terms of shopping and stores, I think, that are a bit more accessible.
Yeah. Yeah. I think if they want to attract locals, they're going to have to have other brands come in that are not quite so expensive. And it'll still be nice stuff, but, not completely exclusive to millionaires kind of thing. So
exactly. I was looking around, I was like, who's actually shopping in here right now? I don't know, but it's a beautiful store.
Yeah. That's the feeling I had last time when we went to Harrods in London. Nobody was shopping. People were just looking around. But of course you look at the prices of things. One tangerine was £3. I'm like, one tangerine, £3? Who can afford that? Are you crazy? So yeah, it's a bit, it's It's a different experience, but it's good to know that. Did you go in the eatery on the 5th floor, or you didn't have time to do that?
We went up there, and the eatery was open, but to be perfectly honest, it was a little crowded. They were, of course, making sure before anyone went inside that people were wearing masks, but there was still a lot of people. So I think that we felt comfortable going in there with our masks on and looking around. But I don't think at that particular point we were like about to sit down in a crowded area like that was indoors and have a meal or have a drink.
Yeah. So how did you feel about mask compliance in Paris? Did you think it was reasonable?
Very reasonable. I mean, I live in California, and in Los Angeles, which is probably a little bit more stricter than most parts of the U.S. And I felt that in general, the Parisians were even better, or I would say more compliant than generally people are here. Mm-hmm. I think that it's definitely going into stores. They would make sure that you had your mask on and make sure that you had your hand sanitizer on. And even in the streets, there were still a good amount of people who walking around, would still wear masks.
Right.
So it is, I think, in general, at least similar to here in Los Angeles, if not a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and since your visit, we've now have the obligation to display a QR code to enter a lot of places. For instance, La Samaritaine is big enough that you would have to, only people who have a QR code, a health pass, would be able to enter. And even then, they have to wear a mask inside. And so, it's pretty safe. And I'll update everybody on if there's any news on the QR codes. I'll do that after this conversation. But the QR code situation is also very easy. I mean, you just turn on your phone, get to the page where you have the QR code, they flash it, in you go. It's really simple. It's very fast. So it's not a problem.
And we were there right as kind of in transition time. So we only had to show proof of vaccination for going into museums. And at that time, they were okay just with our American vaccination cards. But we didn't have to show them for any restaurants up until our very last day there. And actually, when we were in the airport, they asked for our QR code, which at that point we had because we had our test done. But
so you did it with the test.
Right in that transition point.
Right. Yeah. Yes, because you had to have a test going back to the U.S.
Right. So we happened to have it. They probably would have accepted our vaccine card at that time, too, since it wasn't, I think, mandated quite yet.
Yeah.
But we were right in that transition time.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are worried about what if I get COVID while I'm in Paris and then I have to test to come back and I can't come back. Is that something that worried you, or were you fairly, sure that that was unlikely?
I think that's definitely something you have to be concerned about if you're traveling and traveling internationally. It's something that we thought about both before we left and I think while we were there. So before we left, I was we kind of reverted a little bit. So I was like, I don't want to get COVID, or catch anything before we go to our trip on France or, while we're there. So I think we were probably a little bit more conservative for the few weeks before our trip. And, even when we were in Paris, we were there to obviously enjoy the city. But most of our meals we ate outdoors, especially, lunches. A few dinners we had inside as well. Mm-hmm. We were certainly going to the museums, but we were wearing our masks. So at the end of the day, I think it's all about, assessing your personal risk level, going into this, we're healthy, we're vaccinated, we're going to be taking all the precautions, we know that we're coming from a part of America that's pretty well vaccinated and going to a part of France that's pretty well vaccinated. Yep. So all of those things weighed into our decision-making process. Yep. But at the end of the day, I think it's a personal decision for people. You have to take into account your health and prepare yourself for that possibility. Yep. That, it can happen.
Yeah. What part of Paris were you staying in? Did you spend a lot of time in the metro, for instance?
We didn't actually use the metro at all. We stayed in Le Marais and, we usually use taxi or Uber if we were going across town.
Okay. Or
we just walked. We did lots and lots of walking.
Right. Right. Well, yeah, that's the advantage of being centrally located is that you can walk to a lot of places, even if it's a bit far, It's good for you, right? and you get to see Paris.
It's good exercise.
Yeah,
you get to burn off the calories from all those desserts that you're eating.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why I think I always recommend people stay centrally in Paris, because sure, they could save maybe 10 euros on per night of hotel if they go a little further out, but then they're going to be in the metro a lot, and when they're in the metro, they're not walking around Paris. So to me, it's better to try and stay somewhere central and do it that way. All right, let's talk about the places you visited.
Yes.
What was your favorite thing?
Oh gosh, that's pretty tough. I mean, my favorite thing was just being back in Paris, but the favorite thing that we probably visited, I have to say, I really love the Musée Carnavalet, because I'm a little bit of a Paris geek. I love Parisian history. I love, old maps of Paris. And I think if you are a Paris geek, the Musée Carnavalet is the perfect place to be.
Yeah, it is.
There is so much to see there. And even though we didn't exactly do it quite right, in other words, we kind of followed the path into the museum. And I think there's a point right past the entranceway, when you're in that hallway with all of the old signage, where you have an opportunity to go downstairs into the basement or kind of turn off to the left.
Yeah.
I think for whatever reason, maybe I didn't read a pamphlet, but I wasn't really paying attention. We just kind of followed in the hallway going further. So we didn't really do it chronologically. We went through the entire museum first, all the way through the different rooms with the different styles of decoration to the French Revolution. And then in the end, I'm like, oh, we haven't seen old Paris. We haven't seen the Roman stuff or the medieval stuff. And so we kind of had to backtrack and go back down into the basement. But,
right. Yeah.
I think that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So a lot of museums, I like to go to the very top and walk down. But this one, I think it's way better if you start at the bottom, because go downstairs, go below grade right away, because that way you get to see ancient Paris first, and then as you go up, you end up with the Revolution and even modern stuff. I mean, there's a few displays about Je suis Charlie and whatever, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is if you read books about Paris, you will have heard about people and places and things that are significant to the history of Paris, and you go to this museum, and there it is. There's the beautiful door that was in front of the Hôtel de Ville with this kind of
that Medusa head.
Yeah, the Medusa head, la pieuvre. That's the word I was looking for. The Medusa was the word I was looking for. So it's just you read about these things and then you see them and you're like, whoa, there it is. It's really cool. So yeah, for Paris nerds, it's excellent. It's a wonderful place. How long did you spend in the Carnavalet?
We spent about 2 hours. I think that was a good amount of time for us. We actually ended up going there early in the morning. So the whole goal was to kind of see the museum and be done in time for, catching lunch somewhere.
And I assume you walked by Notre-Dame de Paris. They still haven't opened. Yeah, they still haven't opened the whole plaza in front, have they?
No, they haven't. And I felt part of being in Paris again 2 years later was seeing the progression of the work on Notre Dame. And the last time that we were in Paris was in May of 2019. So it was just a few months after the fire had happened.
Yeah.
So I think that, seeing the cathedral now and seeing all the work on it and the things that have changed since then compared to now, to me, it really resonates in my mind.
Yeah.
And I think that I hope to be back in Paris in maybe another couple of years, or maybe sooner than that, hopefully, and continue to see the work that progresses. And I can't wait till that day happens when it reopens again and you get to go inside.
Yeah.
We couldn't really get that close. You could see from some of my pictures, there's still a lot of activity in front of Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of areas it's a little bit unkept. And I think that's part of the charm of Notre Dame right now, is that it is in that state of reconstruction.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, a very unique moment in history. I mean, people will be reading about this fire probably for the next 1,000 years, if not longer. And I think part of just being there in Paris and seeing Notre Dame is witnessing, history as it's happening too.
Yeah. No, it's a very interesting place. And every time I hear somebody talk about the renovations and what they're doing, etc., it's going well. I think they will do their best to reopen by 2024, as Macron had indicated when the fire first happened. I mean, that's one of the first things he said, is we want it back by 2024, which was pretty gutsy, because at that point they didn't even know if the towers were going to stay up. So, it was a big deal. Yeah. All right. So tell me more about your favorite things that you did.
Well, one of the things that we always love to do in France, I'm sure as a lot of people do, is go out to eat. So as I was booking this trip in my condensed 3 to 4 weeks of planning, one of the things that I was planning the trip around was the food that we're going to be eating there. And I had kind of two inspirations. One was from this book that I had been reading. It's an older book. It actually was published in 1929. It's called Where Paris Dines by Julian Street. And it kind of captured my imagination, because it was written by an American journalist and author, and he describes kind of his favorite places eating in Paris in 1929. And, one of the very unique things about Paris is a lot of those restaurants are still in service today.
Right.
Now, granted, people have changed hands a lot of times since then, but, going to those restaurants and experiencing the history that is inside them, to me, was really exciting, really exhilarating. Mm-hmm. And the other thing too was that since I know we had a limited time in Paris, I wanted to kind of experience some of the different cuisines in different parts of France. So I wanted to go to, restaurants that had a bit of a regional flair. So, go to a Provençal restaurant, a Breton restaurant, one that specialized in food from the Auvergne. And so that was my two kind of things going into this. Mm-hmm. And to me, that made the whole dining experience really exciting.
So do you have recommendations of some of these places we should try?
Well, what I would say is that, first of all, if you're looking to do this in August, it's probably not the best month.
No, yeah, because a lot of these classic restaurants do close, don't they?
A lot of them do. I was actually pretty shocked, because I thought that, maybe some would be closed in July, some would be closed in August, but there were a lot of places that were closed, for the first 2 to 3 weeks, if not the whole month of August.
Yeah.
So as I was going through my list of places I wanted to hit up, I was checking closed. So that narrowed things down a little bit.
Yeah.
But the ones that we went to when we were there this time around was L'Escargot, which was on Rue Montorgueil. Mm-hmm. And that's one that's, been there since 1832. It is a little bit touristy. And when we ate there, I don't know if they put us in the American room on purpose, but literally everybody around us was American.
Oh, dear.
I know that takes a little bit of the magic out of it, but it was still great. And it was, I think, fun being inside a restaurant that's been there for so long and then still serving a lot of their classics, their original escargot recipe, their crêpe Suzette, their dishes that they've been known for since, that book that I was reading was written in 1929.
Yeah.
So, I would still recommend it. The food was good. The waiter was super friendly. I mean, I guess if you're looking to be around a lot of French people, maybe that's not the first place to go. But I would certainly recommend it. The other place.
Sorry, can you keep that thought for a second? The only problem is that when people ask me for, the best of this and that and not touristy, that's a really difficult thing, because as soon as something is really, really good, you can bet it's going to be in guidebooks and it's going to be recommended everywhere. And then people visitors will go and fill most of the seats. It's just a fact, and so it's really hard. You have to accept some of that. Otherwise, either you go to places that are unknown and therefore will only have patrons from locals. But that means nobody's written them up. Nobody's talked about them. It's just a little local place. Or you go outside of Paris. Outside of Paris and outside of Provence, it's fairly easy to find places that have a great reputation and are also full of French people. But in Paris and in Provence, it's really hard. It's like, it just doesn't work. Unless you go in the dead of the winter. And then, yes, there are no tourists whatsoever anyway. So then you'll have the local experience.
Yeah, and I think that depends kind of, what area you're going to as well. Because one of the other places we went to was Café de la Rotonde, which was in Montparnasse.
Yeah.
And even though that is still a very famous restaurant in Paris, it was another one that was in my book, one that I was excited to eat at. I'd never been to. It's one that, obviously is associated with President Macron.
Yes.
And so that was, another one that I was excited to check out. And, that had a different feel. And I don't know if that's just because it was outside of that tourist nucleus in the, Marais.
Exactly.
And that
That's
part of
it.
town.
That's it. Because people don't go so much in that area.
Right. But
Visitors.
once again, the food was great. They had fresh seafood and fish.
Oh, yeah.
And the service was great there as well. That was the other thing too. That was a little different about Paris. You just get that little extra bit of excitement from the waiters just to see the tourists are back, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a subtle difference, but I did notice it.
They're actually happy to see you.
They are happy to see you. And I know in Paris frequently, if I try to speak French to the waiters, whatever, they'll switch to English. And I don't know if it's just because they're not as used to the tourists, or maybe my French is a little bit better. But this time around, they would actually speak French with me and, go back and forth. And it was a little bit dangerous because I think maybe they thought I understood more than I did. But that's okay. It pushed me a little bit.
Well, probably because they had a little more time. If they have fewer tables to wait on, they can spend a few more minutes talking to you in French otherwise they just get straight to get down to business. Let's do this in English. Yeah. It's easier, So, okay. So you like La Rotonde, l'Escargot, what other?
And another big historic restaurant that we had been to that's been on my list for a while was Le Trembleu, which is a very unique restaurant even for Paris because it's actually in the Gare de Lyon. Mm-hmm. And when you go to the restaurant, you walk right into the train station.
Yep.
And, we've been to the Gare de Lyon a couple of times in the past when we took our trains to Provence and to Burgundy, I think. And I never even knew this restaurant existed there.
Yeah, you have to.
It's kind of tucked up into the corner. And it's just so gorgeous when you walk in there. That was, a beautiful restaurant. The food, in general, I would say the food was really good. Mm-hmm. I will say the one exception is, and I think you've commented on this before, Grant ended up getting a steak there. And although the sauce was amazing, I think he was a little surprised how tough the steak was.
Yeah. Compared
to, an American steak. And
yeah.
I don't know, maybe it was just the steak. Maybe it was a true difference between French and American steaks. But, I had the fish. The fish was amazing.
Yeah.
We had overall an excellent meal.
Yeah, so with steak, I really like sauce Roquefort. But the thing is, steak in France is usually a bit tough compared to American steak. And I know somebody listening to me are screaming right now, "Oh, best steak I've ever had was in..." Of course, Entrecôte can be very good. If you go to L'Entrecôte, the chain restaurant, and you get your steak rare, then it's very tender, but it's thinly sliced, but if they just serve you a big hunk of steak, it's tough, I think. It's too tough.
But at Le Trembleu, I will say they do have a bit of a flair for presentation because they will, flambe the sauce at tableside. And another difference between America and France is that they are not that worried about how big that flame gets next to you. It was a fire plume, we could feel the heat from it. But it was nice. It was very dramatic. It definitely makes the meal feel special. And the restaurant itself, the paintings on the wall are like paintings of different cities around France. I guess the original idea was when they were commissioned, it was to show cities on the train route that went from Paris to Lyon to the Mediterranean. So they're little, basically vignettes of these towns around France at the turn of the century.
Yeah.
So I think that it's a place where you can go and eat, and you also just want to walk around and look at the place too, and look at the paintings.
Yeah, it's a beautiful restaurant for sure, and the food is fine. It's not. I don't know. I don't think it's the best food in France by any stretch of the imagination, but they are open a lot, even like Christmas Day. Don't quote me, but it's one of the few places that's open a lot. Yeah.
And they're one of the few places that was not closed in August. So
kudos for that.
Kudos for that. Yeah. But yeah, that was a good one. I would say probably our best dinner meal though was probably at Shea Du Monet, and that's like another sort of classic bistro, but more in the Montparnasse area. And that one, the food was amazing. We had stuffed morels. I had duck confit. The souffle was by far the best souffle I've had in my life.
Mm-hmm. The photos look delicious.
Oh my gosh. Like I've been trying to make souffles. I realized that I've been doing something horribly wrong because it was nothing compared to that one I had there. So it's giving me new goals for my souffle.
Yeah, that's hard, isn't it? That's one I have not mastered. I haven't tried very much either, but that's a difficult one to get just right.
It's dangerous to try too much because then you have to eat all your mistakes.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly.
Yep.
Good point.
It's also it's a little bit of a weird name. It's actually called, I think, Restaurant Josephine Shea Du Monet. And I think it used to be called Josephine, so the current chef kept Josephine on there. But it's also in, I think, in the rough area of Montparnasse.
I have not been to that one. That is one I have to try.
But yeah, the other thing is, I said we did a lot of regional restaurants. So, we love Provençal food. I cook Provençal food all the time. And there's a little cafe in the Marais called, Chez Genu, which is great. I think that was probably our favorite lunch because it's healthy. It's vegetables, it's fish. It really kind of, if you're craving a little bit of that, Provençal flair, it's, I think, a really perfect spot. We'd been there before in a past trip, and this was definitely a second repeat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been there. It's good. It's a good place. Chez Jeannot is nice.
Yeah, it's cute. It's just, it's a great casual place to eat. It's not pretentious. The food is good.
Yeah.
We did some I wanted to taste a real galette in France, and I understand Paris is not Brittany, but we've tried to recreate galettes using your cookbook and your recipe, and I have to say there's something we're not getting. So
it's hard.
It's hard. I don't know if it's the buckwheat flour or what, but yeah. So I wanted to try a traditional, French Breton style galette complète.
I think you have to make a lot of them and be ready to throw out the ones that are not, the ones that get brittle. Out, you know.
Yeah, so I felt like those were little fun ways of tasting parts of France without, traveling to all the different corners.
Yeah. Did you do anything? Did you do any Southwestern food?
I was looking for some good Southwestern restaurants, and I don't know if I found any, or maybe they were just closed. We did go to a restaurant that served food from the Auvergne. I had a saucisse d'Auvergne, and that one I think was a bit regional, but I don't know. They're not really considered Southwest there, are they?
Well,
they're more central.
Well, yeah, it's in Occitanie, so it's more central if you look geographically. But aligot saucisse is a typical Southwestern meal, but you can have it anywhere. I mean, it's really hard to mess that one up.
Cheese and potatoes, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so, okay.
Well, one other thing we did that was really fun that wasn't a restaurant was we went to Boulangerie Poland.
Ah oui, Poland, yes.
Yeah, yeah. And so, Apollonia Poland, who's, I think, the third generation baker slash owner of that place, had put out a book. I don't know if it was a year or two ago now. And then she also did a master class on bread making. And so one of the things that, we did during, quarantine and the whole, when everything was all closed down was, read her book, make her bread and make the classic, sourdough loaf, and have your starter and use that to raise your bread. And so we had recreated it at home a few times, and we were really excited to go there and go to the original bakery on Rue du Cherche Midi, which I don't know why I love the name of that street, but
Cherche Midi, yeah.
It's just I don't know, it's fun to say. I don't know.
Yeah.
So
I don't know where the name
there.
is from. Cherche Midi. I'm gonna have to look into that. I don't know why it's called Cherche Midi. It's a good point.
It's cute though. I like it.
Yeah,
I like
it's
it.
adorable. Yeah, so you went to that.
That was good. We had some bread and we were able to bring it home and eat it with some like butter and cheese.
Yeah.
And enjoy some food at home too, because we didn't eat every single meal out, but most of them, we did.
Right. Yeah, this is a very hearty kind of bread, very sourdoughy. It's not really the typical French bread that we eat every day. It's a pain de campagne, very, very campagne,
Yeah, it's also called, I think, a miche, they call it, right?
Yes, une miche, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It's very hearty. It'll fill you up.
And it's got big, big holes inside. I mean, it's just not the type of bread that's super popular for everyday eating, but for specific foods, it's the perfect bread. So
yeah, I found that if you eat it like untoasted, it could be a little dry, but if you toast it and serve it with some butter or something on top of it, then that's really the best way to eat it.
Yeah. All right, let's see. What other favorites did you have? You have so many nice photos. You had some oysters somewhere.
Oh yeah, that was at La Rotonde. One thing that I can recommend to people, if they want a really nice shot of the Eiffel Tower, is if you go to Rue de l'Université, that's where I got that really nice shot of the Eiffel Tower, with the building and the tree. And there's like a little park in that area right by it too.
Yeah.
Because, we've been to the Eiffel Tower before. We've been up to the Eiffel Tower before. But when you're walking kind of right underneath it and in front of it, you don't get that nice angle with the beautiful greenery from the trees and being near that park area there. And that was actually a really nice day because, we ended up, because we were staying in the Marais. So we did, I think, taxi from the Marais to that spot in the Eiffel Tower. But from that spot, we kind of walked to, our destination was go to the Musée Rodin. Mm-hmm. So we walked from the Eiffel Tower, kind of meandering our way through Paris down to Rue Claire, which is, I think, one of the, famous market streets there.
Yes.
In that part of town. So, it was, I think, fun just to check that out and then look at the cute little, cafes and markets there. And then from there, we were able to continue going down until we finally got to our destination at, Musée Rodin, which, I know is one of your recommendations. And I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
Because, you really get that, museum experience of seeing the art, but they also have that beautiful sculpture garden with a little cafe. So it really breaks up that visit.
Yeah.
And it's a really nice way to spend the afternoon.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful walk. The whole area there is a very nice place to walk. So yeah.
It is. It's a very, because we almost always stay in the Marais, or we've been to, I think, Saint-Germain. So we've never really stayed on that side of Paris. So even just walking around the neighborhood felt new to me.
Yeah, every neighborhood in Paris has a little bit of a different flair, which is part of the charm, really.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. What else did you do? I'm looking at your photos. So you went La Tour Saint-Jacques. Did you go up?
No, it was actually closed.
Oh.
For people to go up it when we were there.
Yeah,
so I didn't get a chance to go up, but I've heard you can get really good views of the city from up there.
Yeah.
So that'll
if you catch it when it's open
next time. Yeah. And I don't know if it was just closed because of COVID or because of August, because there were so many things closed because of August. But one or the other.
It's closed a lot of the time.
I was going to say one of the other things that we did, which has been one of the things that we've done almost every time we go to Paris, is we go to a little spot on the Ile Saint-Louis called Place Louis Aragon. It's like right on the tip of the island. And it's just a great spot to just sit and, watch all the activity on the Seine, and people come down there, they drink. It's a very casual little spot. So we usually grab a bottle of rosé, plop down there, hang our legs over the riverbank and enjoy, a few glasses down there. And it's just, such a relaxing way to spend the afternoon.
Yeah.
Although I will say that was the afternoon. That was Saturday afternoon. That was the afternoon they were having the protest marches against the pass sanitaire.
Yeah.
So we kind of heard them a little bit off in the distance.
Yeah.
Because I think they were coming down Rue de Rivoli and they made their way to the Hôtel de Ville. But, that's part of Paris, and, that's, I think, part of living in a city. I think that the police, kept that situation under good control. And so it didn't really, I think, bother our trip. We've been in France before when there's been, protests and strikes and that sort of thing. So I think that it's just kind of comes with the territory.
Yeah, every Saturday it's like who's going to be demonstrating today, not if they're going to. Of course, there's going to be demonstrations. It's a Saturday, but who's going to be the biggest one? This week. It's just. It's one of the things I don't like about French cities. Is one of the it's just you just can't get around it. Every Saturday and Sunday there are demonstrations, and that's true in most major cities.
I know it happens here in Los Angeles, so it's just part of living in a democracy, a free country. People are free to do that. So.
Yeah.
But one thing I want to tell you as well is just about our experience getting our tests for our trip back.
Yes.
So overall, it was fine. We ended up going to a small pharmacy that was right by where we were staying in the Marais. And, we went in there and, the woman working at the pharmacy was very nice. We just explained to her, we needed our COVID test. It was a little different than I expected, though, because I thought we would be given some form to fill out. But instead, she basically takes my credit card, charges us for 2 tests. The receipt prints out and she's like, okay, give me your IDs. And we actually, at that point, we should have brought our passports, but we didn't have them with us. We only had our driver's licenses, so we handed them over. So she just writes our names and our date of birth on the back of the receipt. And she's like, okay, take this over here, get your COVID test. So I was like, all right, well, a little casual for testing, but that's okay. And then we get our test. That all goes fine. They told us to wait about 20 minutes for the result. And then we went to go get them. And the woman's looking at us and she's like, she kind of laughs a little bit. She's like, oh, you guys are both Scots? And we're like, no. And so they had put my first name with both of our last names on our paperwork. And so we're like, no, we need this to get fixed.
Yeah.
And so then they fix it, and I look at my paperwork, and then my birth date is wrong on my paperwork.
Yeah.
And so I hand it back to her again, and she just is kind of laughing to herself. She's like, beaucoup d'erreurs, so it, we had to kind of double check it a little bit. And, even after we left there, when we got back to our Airbnb, it wasn't until the next day Grant was looking at his because he scanned his QR code into the Tous Anti-COVID app, and he realizes that they flipped the month and the year.
Yeah.
So
the month and the year.
I would say,
usually it's
the month and
the day.
Yeah, the month and the date.
Yeah, that's typical.
So I think if we had our passport, that wouldn't have happened because it actually says the month. But she looked at our driver's license, which was obviously done in the U.S. style.
Yeah. Well, yeah, obviously. I mean, this is a problem with everybody in France because we always do the day and then the month and then the year. And so when you look at American dates, it's always the month and then the day. And lots of French people will swap them.
Right. And even though, as I said, it wasn't until the next day, and at that point it was too late to change it, that we realized that his date and month were reversed. We were like, well, I mean, in the American style, it's fine. And, luckily enough, when we were at the airport and they were showing our documents, they weren't looking at that date that closely. So it wasn't a big deal. But I would recommend if you're going to be relying on that to, use to go to restaurants or museums, just to double check to make sure and be cognizant that the birth dates are in reverse so you can make sure that's all properly documented.
Yeah. And this person obviously couldn't do first names either. So.
No, I mean, she was, she had a good sense of humor about it. She thought it was hilarious.
But. Yeah. Yes. Extremely funny.
She cracked herself up.
Yeah. Oh, live and learn. All right. Yeah. Okay. So any last words of wisdom? Is there something you did not like about Paris this time, or was it all pretty nice?
No, I think for me, traveling and especially coming to France is, it always refreshes me in a way that I can't really describe. Obviously, I love France. I love traveling there, and it's been hard for the last couple of years not being able to travel. So I'm really glad that we went. I think we had, a great time. I think this will be a trip that we will never forget. Hopefully there's not going to be, ones like this in the future. I hope that, eventually, things get under control with COVID and, people can start to travel again in a more relaxed manner. Yeah. But I think that for me, it did a world of good. I've been thinking about doing this, for the last year and a half. And I think for other people who are debating it, they just have to, I think, look at, how things are where they live and obviously where they're going and make that decision, based on what's going on and maybe even talk to their doctor. I mean, of course, make sure you're vaccinated. So all of those things are, I think, considerations that we never really had to think about before when traveling.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knew? Last time we talked, we would have never guessed anything like this could happen. But there you are.
Never.
It can.
It can.
Yeah.
But I felt that all being said, the Parisians are very welcoming. Paris was just as beautiful as ever, if not more so, because there were fewer people there. And we had an amazing time.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for talking to me about it. It was very inspiring. I'm sure lots of people are taking notes. And of course, I'll write down all the names of the places and I'll share your photos. You took some beautiful, gorgeous photos. So I will post them on Addicted to France, the Instagram account, and to inspire everybody to go see all these beautiful places.
All right. And thank you, Annie. As always, your podcasts have helped me get through these past couple of years, and keep doing your excellent work. I look forward to all of the wonderful things that you are going to have for us in the future.
Merci beaucoup. Au revoir.
Merci, Annie.
Au revoir.
À bientôt.
Au revoir. Again, I want to thank my patrons for supporting the show and giving back. Patrons get several exclusive rewards for doing so. You can see them at patreon.com/join us. Thank you all for supporting the show. Some of you for many years. You are wonderful. And a shout out this week to new patrons, Kim Cox, Amy Romain Raymer, Chuba, and Robin. Thank you so much for becoming patrons and making this podcast possible. And thank you, George Graves, for increasing your pledge. I sent out a newsletter this week about the health pass situation in France. I've been warning you that a new and improved newsletter would be back in September, and I sent the first one on September 1st. I was itching to clear up all the conflicting and confusing information I read about the French health pass and whether or not it's safe to visit France right now. I think social media is the worst place to get information about France, or actually most things, because you have no idea if the person giving you advice has a clue or not. And even if you trust some people more than others, if you read enough updates from people who think the sky is falling, it's really hard to ignore them. So I thought, I have a newsletter, use it to set the record straight. So I did. Everyone who wrote back was really grateful that I sent it out. Melissa wrote, Annie, I wanted to thank you for this and for the updates you've been providing on the podcast. From a distance, it seems scary and even overwhelming, but the rules varying so much from one country to the next, and even from one day to the next. And she's right. That's a problem. Janet wrote, "Bonjour, Annie. Thank you so much. This has alleviated a ton of my worries. I'm scheduled to fly to Paris with two friends on November 9th for a week in Paris. We're fully vaccinated and so excited to see Paris. Also, thank you for your many, many podcast episodes on your website. I've listened to every single one of them for Paris and many of the other general France ones, some more than once. They are truly priceless. Thank you so much, Janet." And Scott wrote, "Thank you for circulating this. The information is helpful and reassuring, as was your podcast this week. We are scheduled to fly into CDG on the 24th of September. We will spend 3 weeks, including a visit to Sancerre." Scott has been on the podcast talking about Sancerre. They applied for the French health pass on the Ministère de l'Europe site, which I don't know what that is, got an automatic reply on August 11th and haven't received anything since. Since we changed our schedule, I guess we'll just apply again, this time using France Connect, and include the Sancerre address. Thank you for keeping us connected to France through your podcast, Patreon bonuses, and emails. Yes, I'm not sure, people share so many ways to do this. It's really confusing. Anyway, but there is one way that works. So, and I talked about it on the newsletter, and I think that one will continue to work for a while. Antonia wrote, "First of all, thank you so much for the newsletter with the most helpful explanation on the EU directive and the French health pass. One could Google all day and not find anything so informative and clear." Then she asks what could possibly be happening with the email application she sent on August 23rd and why she hadn't heard anything. And then she emailed me a few minutes later saying she just received a response from her email application, and it said, "Dear sir or madam, we are sorry to inform you that we are currently receiving a very large number of requests and will not be able to process them all. We remind you that a negative result of an antigen test taken at a pharmacy available all over France grants the user a health pass that is valid for 3 days, 72 hours. We inform you that a new application is available online for foreign citizens, except students," and then they give a link for the foreign citizens that are not students, and the following link for students. So the students go through a different path. So now you know, if you've applied sending an email, do it again by going through the France Connect website. And I'll put all of those links in the show notes. joinusinfrance.com/353. And by the way, when you fill out that form, remember that France Connect is a system designed for French people. They translated the France Connect site into English, but they did not localize it fully. Now, let me reach back into my previous life as a software translator. There is a big difference between translating something and localizing something. If you translate it, you change the words from English to French or French to English or whatever to whatever. If you localize it, you make it usable for people who use the reference point of a different culture. At one point in the application process, you have to select the country where you had your shot. An American would look for United States or USA, but that's not one of the options on this French website. So I thought, it probably would be under E for États-Unis d'Amérique, which is what the name of the USA is in French. But no, it's under T. Why T? Well, that's for Territoire des États-Unis d'Amérique. I don't know where they got. Software pulls information from different lists, and I don't know where they're pulling the list of countries from in France Connect, but it's got to be an odd list to call the USA Territoire des États-Unis d'Amérique. And why didn't they fix that before? Probably because it's a site for French people. Anyway, thank you, Antonia, for telling me about that gem. So if you're looking for USA in that list, look under T, Territoire des États-Unis d'Amérique, en Amérique. All kidding aside, the sky is not falling. France is not going to stop vaccinated Americans from visiting. We're actually doing rather well on the pandemic front. Thank you very much. Whether or not you travel to France right now is none of my business, but don't blame France. We're doing everything we can to safely be open and welcoming. Is it perfect? No. Are there people who apply for their health pass and don't get it in time? Yes. Are there places where they'll refuse to take your CDC card? Yes. Mostly outside of Paris. The minute you buy your plane ticket for France, apply for your health pass and keep in mind that most people are getting theirs on time. Some are not, but most are. And compare that to zero efforts made by the American administration into allowing French and European visitors in. Nothing, zero. Europeans cannot visit the US for any reason right now, and it's been that way for over a year, I didn't check, but a long time, with no end in sight. So they're not putting in any effort into any sort of system that would allow safe visitors in. They're not trying. In France, we're trying. It's not perfect, but we're trying. Now, I know that some of you are thinking, it makes sense. France is dying without all the money brought by American tourists. And if you think that, you are wrong. The percentage of GDP in France linked to tourism is between 8 and 10%, depending on who you ask. Guess what percentage of the American economy is linked to tourism? Between 8 and 10%. So both France and America have exactly the same monetary incentive for letting visitors in. It's not about the money tourists bring in, at least not in France. It's about making it possible for normal life to resume. As I record this, 85% of French people over 12 have had one dose of the vaccine. 78% have had 2 doses. We've got to continue pushing for vaccines so that the remainder 15% who haven't been vaccinated actually take the plunge. I don't know why they see it as a plunge. If this vaccine were dangerous, we'd all have grown a third arm by now. On the TWIV podcast, that's This Week in Virology, one of the guys made an excellent point. We will all get immunity to this virus. Some of us will get it because we've been vaccinated, and the rest will get it because they will get infected. They will get sick. The risk of getting the vaccine is tiny compared to the risk of getting sick from COVID-19. Your choice. I think that's a really powerful message. And hopefully we can push it into more and more people. And while I'm recommending podcasts, I want to recommend a wonderful podcast in French. It's called Mesdames d'Occitanie, and it's a podcast made in Toulouse about the forgotten women in Toulouse history. It's nothing like my conversational podcast. This one is scripted. They hire actors. It's a whole production. But the stories are wonderful. It's just that you have to speak advanced French to enjoy it. Otherwise, you're going to be very lost. If you decide to come to France soon, I'll be happy to be your itinerary consultant. Tell me what floats your boat, and I will give you custom recommendations from a local. If that's something you'd like to do, go to joinusinfrance.com/boutique for the details. For my personal update this week, I attended a wonderful party yesterday. It was to celebrate birthdays, and it felt like pre-pandemic almost. People were very uninhibited, and since most of us are vaccinated, it wasn't scary. And also, I'll be going back to Spain for about 10 days later in September. My daughter is finishing up her internship and is about to finish her master's degree in computer science. I am so proud of her, smart kid. I had to actually move an itinerary review because she learned kind of late in the game when she'd be doing her soutenance de maîtrise, and it's public now again. Last one that she did was was on Zoom, but this time we can go, so we'll go. Anyway, I'm so proud of her. She's a wonderful kid. And she has 2 precious weeks off before she starts her new job. And she'd like some well-deserved vacation time. So this time we'll take the Labradoodle OP, and we found a beach where we can take the dog and all enjoy the beach together. It's a bit far from my apartment, but, we'll have to take the car and all that. But it's worth it. So we'll have fun for, 10 days or so, enjoying the last stretch of summer in Spain. And I'm also planning on a long weekend with my husband to celebrate his birthday. So I'm not sure where we'll go yet, but there's so many great places to pick driving distance from the south of France where we live. Nous n'avons que l'embarras du choix. And that would be the French tip of the week. Avoir l'embarras du choix, or j'ai l'embarras du choix, meaning an embarrassment of possibilities, too many possibilities. Now, this is not negative in any way, because in English, if you say, oh, I got too many choices, that can sound like negative, but in French, it's all positive. Je n'ai que l'embarras du choix, and that's a good thing. And being mostly done with my shoulder tendonitis, my body thought I needed tendonitis somewhere else. So how about tendonitis under my right foot? I've had it before in that spot, and what fixed it was orthotics. So I rushed to get new orthotics, but my doctor said you must also get physical therapy and get onde de choc. That's French for torture of the foot, also known as shockwaves. With a name like that, I was not excited about that prospect, but the shockwaves, it's really a hammering machine. It hits the tendon like fast. I wouldn't say it's pleasant, but it's totally bearable, and it feels like maybe it helped a tiny bit. So far, I only did one, but I think it might have helped a little bit. So if it can get rid of the tendonitis, I'll be very happy. I think what got it started this time is that the whole summer I was wearing sandals with no arch support, and that's really bad for me. So back to good old Birkenstock sandals, which are the only ones with good arch support. I tried cuter sandals from, Merrell and Columbia, but the arch support is barely better than flip-flops as far as the arch is concerned. So, my feet will get the support they need no matter what it takes. Birkenstocks it is. Show notes for this episode are on joinusinfrance.com/353, where you can see a recap of all the things we've discussed, as well as links to relevant resources. And if you enjoyed the show, introduce a friend to the podcast and show them how you listen. Next week on the podcast, an episode with Elise about Moissac in our neck of the woods in the southwest of France. Very cute place, you'll see. Send questions or feedback to Annie@joinusinfrance.com. Thank you for listening, and I hope you join me next time so we can look around France together. Au revoir. The Join Us in France travel podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2021 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.